Welcome to the Path Podcast, where we will travel the lives of some bold women, from dreams to detours to destiny. She did not choose this path. This path chose her. This is the Path Podcast. You're listening to the Path Podcast with your sister, your motivator, your confidence builder, the one who believes that purpose is bigger than obstacles. Don't forget to follow the show so you don't miss an episode we drop bi-weekly. Today, Path listeners, I am so excited about my guest on today's show. I have been enjoying her podcast because, ladies, I need you to think back over the course of your career. Now think back to a time that you were the only one invited to sit at the table at work. Or not about lunch. I'm not talking about lunch. I'm talking about maybe in a boardroom. Look around the room and find that most times you are the only one there. It can be because of your race. A lot of times it's because of your gender. I know that because I've been there many times before. Well, today my guest knows this feeling oh too well in the industry that she's in today. My guest is Tonia Rivers. She is the founder of a nonprofit and podcast entitled Mothers in Construction. Like I said, I don't want to waste a lot of time no more on my podcast. I want to jump right into it. So, Path listeners, help me welcome in my guest, Tonia Rivers. Hi, Tonia. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me here today.
No, I thank you for saying yes and coming on as I connected with you through a mutual friend that we know. Shout out to her. And so I'm going to tell everyone first. Ladies, if you're searching for ways to do it all, grow in these male-dominated fields, start a family, or maintain the family you have while growing in your career and connect with like-minded women, what Tonia is doing today and what we're going to talk about today is for you. So, Tonia, I want to first ask you, tell me a little bit about you, about Tonia Rivers.
All right. Well, Tonia Rivers. Tonia is from Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I currently reside with my family in North Carolina. I'm a military spouse of my husband of 7 years. So we're actually here on an assignment. I have 3 beautiful children, wonderful children under the age of 10. And also I've been a project manager in the construction industry for the past 17 years.
Wow. That's a lot, everyone. Military wife, mother of 3, and in the construction industry. Wow. We have a lot to talk about, as you will see. And we'll get into you starting about your nonprofit and the podcast. But before I do all of that, Tonia, thank you so much again for being here and sharing some of your background. I know you skipped a lot, but I know you did because of the industry you're in. But we'll get into that. So I always love to start the podcast asking my guest about the younger person. So tell me about the younger Tonia, the one who thought she had life all figured out. What were your hopes and dreams? And are you doing it today?
I wish the younger Tonia thought that she had everything figured out. Goodness, when I was younger, I grew up in the projects of Brooklyn. So, in my household, even though we were in the projects, there were a lot of working families there, such as mine. A lot of my friends. I'm not saying that it was without, some of the bad things that you hear about, but there are definitely a lot of working families there. So we had a lot of role models to look up to, and a lot of us had our parents to push us. Mm-hmm. My parents were of the mind, go out of the neighborhood, and that's one thing that helped my sisters and I realize that there was more to the world than just what was on the 4 corners of our block. Yeah. We went to school out of the area. High school, junior high school, and we met different people. We were involved in different programs. We all went to school. We also went to school out of the state. So I went to Howard University. I did forget to mention that. Yes, very importantly, I graduated.
I knew that was
Howard.
one of them.
Yes, ma'am. I graduated from Howard University with a degree in architecture. But the young Tonia really was, I guess I've always been somewhat of a rebel at heart. I always went against the grain. That's one thing that my family always mentioned is that, I never held back. And I think that having a personality like that was definitely necessary to survive in the neighborhood that I came from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my father was very tough on us, and he's very rough, and that's one of the things that he pushed on us because I have um, four sisters. There's five of us that he raised, and he didn't have any boys, and he said, "Look, I can't." Protect you guys all the time. So you guys got to be tough, So he definitely raised us really hard, knock, really tough. And I will say that even though at times I didn't appreciate it when I was younger, but it definitely prepared me and built me for the woman that I am, that is able to, I want to say, have a career in this construction industry. So that was the young Tonia. The young Tonia was just hardcore. They My friends call me thoroughbred,
I love that.
hardcore, but also I've always been driven to follow my dreams. So when I went to high school, I was able to go to one of the specialized high schools in New York, and we had majors, and my major was architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of exposed me to that side um, of the industry. And what I chose to do was to go to Howard University for architecture. And while I was matriculating through Howard, I also did internships in the construction industry. That way I could figure out whether or not I wanted to go into design or whether or not I wanted to go straight into construction. So at the end of the day, construction won, but design is always in my heart. So um, whereas the young Tonia didn't really know what she wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I always knew is that one day I needed to complete promises that were made that I would get my registration. So that's something that is let's call it a 5-year goal of mine because
Yes.
I don't want to put too much pressure on myself.
That
So
as a wife and mother, yeah, you can't put all that pressure on yourself today, I know. But
yes,
when you're driven, like you said, and how you were raised, I heard in one of your podcasts with your husband, you said that type A personality, I can see,
yes,
why you will probably put some of that pressure on you because you can tell you're a person who, as you say, you're a rebel at heart. All of that prepared you definitely for the area you're in today. But let me ask you, when you said that you didn't quite know, so you took an architecture class in high school, that was your first introduction to kind of thinking about it, and it kind of thrust you into the world you're in today?
I didn't know anything about architecture and never really put too much thought into the buildings that we're walking into
Yeah.
every day.
Mm-hmm.
My family, you made it when you graduated or became a nurse or became a doctor. Like
Yep.
that's all they knew.
Yeah.
And when I presented architecture, they kind of looked at me, and I remember my grandmother said, "Well, what is that?"
Mm-hmm.
My father said, "What is that?" My mom said, "What is that?" But the good thing about it is, even though they weren't so excited about it, they didn't push me away. And I know
Good.
there are some families where, the parents say, "Hey, if you don't go to school for what I want you to go to school for, I'm not paying for your education." I never heard that one bit.
Wow.
So I actually took architecture only because I was on the track team, was a previous passion of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And the coach, he was one of the teachers for the architecture program at the high school. That's the only reason why I took it. But as I got into it and I started taking classes, I mean, at school, it's called Brooklyn Technical High School
Mm-hmm.
in Brooklyn, New York. It's a wonderful school, and it exposes the young students to so much.
Yes.
And we had building construction class, we had construction materials classes, we had a drafting class. So just throughout all of that, had I really grew to have a passion for architecture and construction.
Let me tell you, I wish all schools would offer something like that. I would think I would have gravitated, I would think, I'm not sure, into something like that. And I think that would open up the world to so many other people to get into different things. Like you said, you never thought about architecture, and even your parents was like, what is that? So what made you kind of go towards construction over design?
So again, while I was in high school, I had a building construction class, and the teacher there, he also taught us wood shop. There was actually a condo that was being built a few blocks from the school, and he took us down to the job site every now and then so we could see the progression.
Yeah.
And when I saw the workers working and I saw the progression of the site and just started paying attention to the different systems that were going in and when, I just loved it.
Wow.
I really loved it. And I just loved the idea of taking something off of paper and actually putting it to use. And to be honest with you, I had a plan, right? My plan was to get my architectural degree and let my internships tell me.
Mm-hmm.
The internships that I had with the designer, it was for one of the actual medical laboratory company.
Mm-hmm.
But they had architects that designed their labs. But for lack of better words, and I hate to say it like this, it was pretty much boring because
Yeah.
when you deal with some of these pharmaceutical companies, they've got templates, and there's nothing wrong with that because, especially with what they do and how they have to, how fast science moves and how they have to make sure that their buildings are always up to par, you're going to have the template. So I wasn't really seeing anything dynamic that really interested me.
Okay.
But when I did my internships in construction, I worked in for the Department of Transportation in New York doing sidewalk construction. So I was out with the inspectors, inspecting sidewalks and sending off violations to homeowners and to businesses, and just being in that beat, and walking with these guys and seeing them coordinate with some of the workers on site. I just kind of love that.
Mm-hmm.
And then another internship I had was with a general contractor up in New York, and they teamed me up with an estimator. So just seeing him coordinate with, at that time, we were still doing blueprints. So
Mm-hmm.
having conversations with the guys in the plans room, and then taking that paper and taking it off and putting together the proposals and things like that. It was just the whole flavor of construction, the smell of it, the beat of
Yeah.
it, the conversations, unfortunately, which are very rough. I was all for it. You know what? And if I think about it, it reminds me kind of how I grew up, where it was like very dynamic and fun,
Yeah.
but hard. And, it's just very exciting, and it was very high energy. So I guess in a sense, maybe subconsciously I was looking for that same amount of energy, and construction definitely gives you that.
Yes, it will. I can imagine in that world. After you did your intern, you started out as an estimator.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
Yes, my very first company. I was all geared up to go out in the field and work on my first job site, but that just wasn't, it didn't meet the company needs at the time.
Mhm.
When I finally reported to work. So they put me in the estimating department, and I stayed there for about a year and a half.
Mhm.
And I'll tell anyone that even though it's not really that glamorized, especially to the young engineers, because they just want to go right out on site, it was the best thing that had ever happened to me for my career.
Oh wow, that's good to know. And as of today, now, like you said, you fell into architecture, but the high school you were in, it was a tech school for some of you high tech people. I'm gonna say,
Yes, it was.
so everybody wasn't gonna be going there. Obviously, that's probably why I would not have been
Yes.
there.
Well, they call it a science school.
Okay.
And it does have has engineering, it had architecture, but it was very heavy in all subjects, and you did have to take a test to get in. But as I mentioned, my parents didn't really want us to go to school in the neighborhood because, unfortunately, just with the resources and everything, and that's a whole nother podcast as far as the impoverished neighborhoods and the
Yeah.
resources that are given and the education that is in those areas, and we were victims to that.
Yes.
So I did apply to a specialized junior high school that I attended. It's called Philippa Schuyler,
Mm.
and named after Philippa Schuyler.
Mm-hmm.
And it's they call it for the gifted and talented. So from that school, it was a thing that everybody went to Brooklyn Tech or one of the science schools or some of the other schools in New York that were kind of well known. So the reason why I chose Brooklyn Tech was because of that. It was just one of those things that you go to that school, you take the test to get into one of the science schools, and you go.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us, a very large population of that particular middle school, did attend Brooklyn Tech. So I just wanted to be with my friends for the most part. And I can't say that it was really because of my love for STEM.
Yeah.
It hadn't started yet. It really was, I just want to be with my friends.
And it all worked out, which is wonderful. I get so wrapped up into beginnings and understanding, how it all worked itself out eventually to what you are doing today. So you started out as an estimator and already worked your way up to what you consider a project manager. Were you married and have started your family already at that time? Or you project manager
No,
first?
no, I didn't get married until 2015 and I started in 2005. So
Okay.
10 years in.
Got you.
Yep. About 10 years in to my career. I was married. So yes, at that time when I met my husband, I was already a project manager and I was a single mom as well. I'd already had my for my son.
Okay.
Yep. So
So
yeah.
you were already doing it, definitely with the mom thing. When you became a project manager, tell us first, what is a project manager in construction? What do you particularly do in that field, in that area?
Yeah, so I worked for a general contractor, and the general contractor basically manages the construction projects that are the actual work in the field is done by subcontractors. So a project manager is responsible for the schedule, for the budget, and for the overall management of the project. Typically, that is the face of the project. That's the main coordination with the owners. And they coordinate with the superintendents on the project. The superintendent is actually the person on a project who runs the field. So they directly manage the subcontractors. And they're in the field most of the day. And they sometimes they call the project managers the office people. They call it the office side. And a real good project manager doesn't stay in the office all day, but for the most part, we really can't do a lot of our work walking around in the field. So there's always that dynamic on the job site of whether who's doing the hardest work, if you're outside in the sun all day or if you're in the air conditioning.
Yeah.
But the project manager is the overall manager for the project. They make a lot of the decisions and they are the point person for the projects.
Okay. Which to me and to everyone out there, that we know what it is in corporate America, what it is to run a project. You bringing in multiple teams to get it done. You got a timeline, you got schedules, you got deadlines, and you're doing this for buildings, of course. And
yes.
and a lot of bigger teams sometimes, because sometimes I know when I was in the office, we have a certain person come in from maybe IT if I needed someone on the IT team, or maybe someone for in my world, I'll just say marketing or merchandising. Every part, everyone plays a part. Yours has to be difficult. So now tell me, you're a mother running these projects. Tell me I'm just going to ask, how did you do it all? I'm trying to see how I want to go into this part, because let me read statistics first to everyone. I looked into, of course, I do my research about the construction field. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2021, women accounted for 11% of the construction workforce. And they said a lot of these new roles have been obtained by younger women, probably, and which is a little bit more than less than half over a year ago, I think it said. And then it talked about the gender equality in the traditionally male-dominated construction industry, and it improved in 2021, but they didn't say why, but they said it did improve where more women are coming into it, but still 11% is very low. Tell me, you're one of those in that small percentage. How is that being on a construction site as a project manager in this male-dominated world, running a project and with a family? What is a day like for Tonia?
Well, I'm in a different role now. But when I was on the job site, it was different. Right now, I'm more or less representing the customer. I work for the government now.
Okay.
But when I was on site, I'm not gonna say it was easy. It was very difficult. There are a lot of days when you just want to walk away. A lot of days when, because first of all, let's just start with the perception.
Yes.
So if I'm in a trailer with some of when you first start out in construction, you're considered, they call them engineers. And then you go to a project engineer, And depending on your path, you're either going to go to the field side if you're working your way up to being a superintendent, or you're going to go to the project management side. So let's say you've got 5 people in a room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You've got young males. You have like a 30-year-old woman. You've got young males. And at this point, I'm not even going to talk race. Okay. You've got maybe 3 young males. You've got an older gentleman there.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the 5 people, right?
Yes.
When somebody walks in that door and opens the door, who do they go to first?
The men, the older gentleman,
There you go.
over the younger ones, but a man.
There you go. And then after they have that conversation, we'll turn around to me and say, hey, can you make a copy for me? And I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times where I'm in a leadership position. This is my project. I'm running the project, and I'm walking with one of my young engineers and giving them a tutorial session.
Yes.
And you'll have an outside person come in. I never forget, it was a project that I had just done. And they actually was the Capitol. I worked on the exterior restoration for the U.S. Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a contractor who was bidding on the next phase of work for that project. And they wanted to know, just to get some ins and outs on, the project and some of the logistics. And I was walking with my engineer, and I would like to think that I look so young.
Yes.
But I had to at least look like his older sister.
Mm-hmm.
And the gentleman came over and he just immediately started talking to my young engineer. My young engineer just stood there and smiled at him and said, well, you need to talk to her. She's the project manager. Oh my goodness. No offense. I wasn't mad at him, because that's just the perception. That's just the world we're in. Yeah. And this was a few years ago.
Just a few years ago.
Maybe 4 or 5 years ago this happened. And it continues to happen. It's still happening every day. People are still looking at me and they're not used to seeing me.
Of course.
So it's tough. It's tough because you're always fighting. You're always fighting your position. You're always fighting to be heard. If you say something, if the man next to you says the same exact thing, no one hears it until he says it. You deal with sexual harassment, sexist comments, whistling, comments about your body, even comments from, I've been in some really stressful situations with people that I worked with. And I'm encouraged by this movement that we have where women, we are demanding our respect. Yes. And we know our roles, we know our place. But I'm going to tell you, when I started, we didn't always raise that fight, and right, wrong, and indifferent. What I always chose to do was to make sure that I demanded the respect that I was going to get, so whenever these comments made, I may not have run it up the chain. I'll be honest with you. Yes. I dealt with it in a situation. So when I was dealing with that, because I knew that if I said something or if I made a big stink about it, then I'd have a stamp on my back, yes. And I never really wanted that. I wanted to have the opportunity to get there so that I could help other people. But you have to nip it in the bud, because people are going to try you. And so when you're dealing with all of that, it just becomes very mentally draining. And I think a lot of women walk away from it because, some of us wear our emotions on our sleeves. I mean, we can't help it.
Yes.
And sometimes that's not always welcomed or appreciated. But I will also say that I have not witnessed what some women have gone through, where they're physically held back because of their gender or because of the way they look. I never felt that. I can honestly say that all of the companies that I worked for gave me as much as I can take on. So I never felt that being a woman or being a Black woman held me back from anything that I wanted to attain throughout my career. And
thank you for saying that, because we do listening to all what you said already, because I had those questions there talking about the harassment sometimes that women can deal with, especially being in this male dominated field, of course, and the conscious and unconscious biases that's out there. All of those things are real, along with so many more, but it's good too, like you said, to have that great, a lot of people still can say it was different for them, to have a positive, make a positive point that you felt like that didn't hold you back, or you didn't experience that. And that's wonderful. And that's good. And we should always say the good, even when we have to talk about the not so good stuff. that goes on along in these jobs. Because sometimes I can tell you, I have one example where I feel like that story is a little different about I felt like this person looked at me and he was just wondering why I was sitting there, because the CEO, and again, it was the CEO of one of the founders of Home Depot, told me to go speak to this VP to get in their marketing department. This man looked at me like, why are you here? I'm only doing this because Arthur Blank sent you here. So he did a wonderful thing. A young person right out of college trying to get around her area, and, don't have the experience. I always had that go-getter attitude, but when he did something great to say, go talk to the VP of marketing. And then you go there and he looks at you like you don't belong here. And I felt that. I knew it. And he didn't even give me an opportunity to try anything. But, everybody's stories are different.
I was going to say it definitely is. And I've had that too. I've had people look at me and say, why are you here? I've had people question why I was being copied on emails. I've had someone in a conversation say the N-word.
Oh, wow.
Like I wasn't even standing there.
Wow.
I've had someone that was on one of my previous teams would not talk to me directly. I would be standing right in front of this man, and another one of the engineers who was a male would stand there, and this man would look towards the other engineer and say, hey, I want you to tell Tonia to do this and do that. But guess what Tonia would do? I would go look him right in the face and say, Tonia's standing here, and if you want me to do something, and this is young. I was probably, year and a half, 2 years out, 2 years out of college. If you want me to do something, you need to direct it towards Tonia. The thing is, you have to demand your respect.
And let me tell you, Tonia, even though it's in you, that's, again, I'm going to give kudos to your mom and dad, be how you were raised. It's just innately in who you are, of course, but they fostered that to make sure you spoke you had that you were that rebel at heart, like you even said. So you knew you're going to address me. You're going to see me standing here. And like they say, some people don't see you, but you have to make that point that I'm here and my voice, I'm going to speak up. And a lot of women can't do that today. More today than they did yesterday, as we said, but I'm glad you did that, because that puts that respect there. Because I had that sitting here too, talking about what you said, earlier in one of the podcasts I listened to, that the obstacles and the hurdles that you found yourself in, the internal struggles, of course, the respect, and all of that piled on top of everything else you would have to deal with. Then I want to move into you having a family. Like you said that in one of your podcast, that you said you love both. You worked hard to get there, and you were not going to let it be in vain. So tell me, how did you consider starting a family? And you already have your son. You got 2 more you added on top of what you said is a very stressful job. You got deadlines. You have major projects you're running. Dealing with all of that at work, how did you do this while raising your family?
Oh, yeah. Well, let me say, I know when you ask people, sometimes they say, I don't know how it happened. We all know how it happened.
Yes.
I fell into the kids the same way I fell into the profession, Look, so-called living my life.
Yes.
And I was in a relationship. I had my son. That didn't work out well. And I found myself one day, and I always say this to people, is that being a single mom, it happens overnight.
Yeah, yes.
It's nothing that you can plan for all the time. One day you're in a relationship. One day you got 2 incomes coming into the household. And then the next day, boom, you're on your own. Yeah. And I will tell you that experience was enough to break me. And I got really close to being broken, but it added so much strength to me. It added, what it did was it strengthened my relationship with God. When you ask me how I did it, it wasn't through anyone but Him.
Yes. Because
when I look back, and sometimes I got to get out of my head, because I sit and I I think about the past and I'm like, why am I worrying about it? Like I can actually feel the emotions from 10 years
Yes.
ago. But I appreciate my mind for bringing me back those places. And I think that's probably God too, so I can remember
Mm-hmm.
how far I've come.
Yeah.
But it strengthened my relationship with God. At that point, I felt hopeless. I felt helpless. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to do nothing. I was crying. I was depressed. I was low, 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 where the pain is so deep that you can't touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Low. Okay. And I didn't know how I was going to get through. And you know what? I said, you know what, God, I'm coming back. You know, not that I ever left God, but
Yes.
I really, really, really put my soul into him, because at that point, there was nothing that my family could say. There was nothing that my friends could say that could heal me.
Mm.
So when I started going to church more, I started praying more, I got into the word more. I just started opening my all the aspects of my life up to God. It made things a little bit easier for me to deal with
Mm-hmm.
mentally. It didn't take away the stress.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just took it day by day. It's really no other way to say it, because of course I'm a single mom now. I'm doing all the doctor's appointments. I'm doing the drop-offs, the pickups. Uh, when you get sick, you gotta be
Yes.
home. I got projects, I have meetings. And then you know what? I was just blessed also to be with teams who understood. My superintendents understood,
Wow.
held me down.
Mm-hmm.
My engineers, you know, I was able to, I consider them my children. I always call it, I have like so many kids. Um, I was able to rely on them when I needed to. And then I've been teleworking and working off of the phone for my entire career, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. It wasn't a thing, but if I'm the only person that has to take care of my son, I can't be there if he's sick. I've got to be home with
Of
him.
course.
But that didn't stop my show. And I think that that is what the companies always appreciated of me, is that I really didn't miss a beat for the most part. You know, I'm
Exactly.
not going to say that I was perfect and
Of
everything,
course.
but that's how I did it. I feel like it made me a better leader. It made me a better communicator. It made me learn how to be very resourceful, so that when it came to my day,
Mm-hmm.
I knew when to make calls. If I needed to call somebody because of my superintendents, they got downtime, they're getting to work at 4:30 in the morning. That's when we had our conversations. That's when I learned about everything we needed to do for the day. I knew to start calling my subcontractors at 7, get things in motion. And literally, I'm telling you, if there were fights, like physical arguments on the project where people just couldn't talk to each other, I filtered some of that stuff on the phone. Like
Wow. Wow.
that is what a project manager
Yes.
does. You
Yes.
deal with arguments, you diffuse situations. Um, so I think I became pretty good at doing that, because of the fact that I didn't have a choice, that I had my son that I had to raise, and he was looking at me,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that failure wasn't an option.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
Moving forward.
Let me tell you, I
Yes,
saw
ma'am.
everything. I love everything you said, and all of it. Where you say failure wasn't an option. I know where you are. When I went through my divorce, I I was always raised in the church. No, church, and went to church all my life. But as we grow and out of college, kind of move away from it, but it was still always in me. But once you go through
Yes.
something, sometimes, or it gets hard, it's like, yes, I need to know. I need to connect here. I'm.
Yes.
That's where I connected to. And so I love the fact that I'm glad. I always tell people I went that way instead of going the other way or being
Yes.
angry, and all of that. So that's a powerful for anybody, and should encourage anybody if you're going through that today, unfortunately, where you feel like you at a point where you need to connect again back to him. If you're not there, connect to him. It's still not easy, but he wants us to get it right. And he just
Mm-hmm.
wants us to trust him as we learn to navigate still that busy world that you were still in, still had to take care of your son, still had deadlines, still had everything you were
Yes.
dealing with, but it made it, like you said, I don't know if to say it's easier, but it does take some pressure off for some reason.
Yeah.
It did that for me.
Yeah.
Take some pressure off.
Yeah.
It's something I read. uh Her name is she used to work at Google. She was over a certain team there, Martha Ivester, and she had a TED talk. And I don't know if you heard it, and it said you need to hire a mom. She was telling companies, I think it's called hire mom. Moms are the best people to hire. And she said she stayed at home for 10 years. She was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years, but it taught her how to be a better leader. And she broke it down. It was a wonderful TED Talk. Moms are some of the best leaders out there. If you know how to, because you have to, you manage it. Like I heard you say on your podcast, you brought it into your some of your project management skills at home. And then of course you took a lot of what you did at home as a mother who is a project manager and you took that to work. Because you said, I heard you tell when you brought two people you work with that you mothered them, so much in the project. And then when you had to leave to go on maternity leave, and I don't want to keep getting ahead of myself, but but so it goes hand in hand, because I want to move into when you started with everything you talked about. At what point did you say, okay, I need to start a nonprofit and a podcast to other mothers? Because if you felt that way, it had to be millions, I'll say the 11% that's out there, and some who are interested in coming into this out there that could benefit from this. When did you decide to do that, and what made you do it?
Yeah. So I kind of got to go back a little bit. When I got married to my husband, of course, when you're dating, I had all these no's, right? And one of the no's was no one younger than me, and one of the no's was someone in the military.
And you got both, probably.
I got both. But I'm going to tell you the no to someone in the military was, how in the world could you tack on that life to yours?
Let me tell you, I don't want to interrupt you, because I was trying to see where to bring him in, being in the military. And I'm sitting here like, of all people, someone in the military? But please continue.
But let me go all the way out and explain that. I met my husband online.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. That's another podcast.
Yes, we'll do that one, ladies. We'll do that live.
Look, broken down, single mother, not into dropping off my child to everybody so that I could go live my life.
Yes.
Fully devoted mom. Yes. When do you have the time to meet all of these people? Yes. So a friend of mine encouraged me to do the online thing. I fought it. I'm like, look, I'm not going to, I call it ending up in some soup. I hate to say it like that and joke about it, but that's what I told her. I was like, look, I don't know this, but she said, you don't know the person in the street too. I said, got it.
True.
And the beauty in that was that because my husband was in the military, when we first started to have interaction, he was in Korea. So we talked just about every day for 3 or 4 months before I even met him. So it was one of the best things that ever happened in my life. And, we got a chance to really know each other. And at that point, I didn't care if he, worked at Kmart or something like that. It was about love. You can't fight who you love. So just him being in the military was just a thing that once we started to get serious with each other, said that, hey, when we get to the point where we have to deal with a move or anything like that, we'll deal with it as a family. So anyway, with a husband in the military who traveled at the time, even though he was stationed in DC, the organization that he was with at the time, he traveled a lot. So again, even though I had my backbone and my support, a lot of times I was left with the children. I did have 2 more children with him, and I'm still a project manager. So even though things were manageable to a point, I would say the guilt between mom and being on a project, the stresses from being on a project, just the natural stresses of running a project where things happen, catastrophes happen on projects. I have one project where a water main broke, and it's running down a major street in Washington, D.C., near a really important building in Washington, D.C., and the building got flooded. And these are all things you have to think about, because you got to fix that. Yeah, it happened, but it has to be managed, right? That project was a very, very intense project because we had a lot of work to do in a little bit of time. And, I had a large team that I was managing, and it required me to be available the entirety of my day. I mean, there were times when I would get home with the kids, and my executive, we had meetings at 9 o'clock at night that went until 11, almost 12 o'clock in the morning. And then I remember having email chats with my architect and my owner, and we're like talking, and it's 10:30 at night. That was just one of those projects. So just think about that. Now I had a newborn child, and I'm doing all of this stuff. So it was so stressful.
Yes.
It was so stressful. Construction is stressful. I'm not gonna lie to anybody and say that it's not, because when you care about it, if you don't care about it, it's a breeze.
Yes.
But when you put your heart into it, and when you care about making deadlines, if you're supposed to be done in September, you got to be done in September. If that means that you're working 24-hour shifts, you're working 7 days a week, that stuff wears on your body, right? So now I need to be a mom. Now I need to go to events. I'm missing events for my children. You wake up in the morning and somebody's got a fever. You got an important meeting that you're supposed to be at. You know what I mean? Like, you got a newborn baby, and you got everybody dressed. You out the door, they got their coat on, and they throw up all over the place. Like, they just talk about the reality of it. Now you're going to be an hour late to work because you got to go upstairs, you got to stop, you got to get them dressed again. It's a lot, and that's just being a mom, period. But when you tack it on to being in an industry that's so demanding, it was a lot. And I just said, there's no way that this industry is for moms.
Yeah.
Can't do it. Not doing it anymore. There was so many days I cried. I was miserable. I was depressed. I just everything, right? So I actually put in my paperwork to my job and said, I can't do this anymore. My husband, he's getting ready to deploy. Because at that time, my husband's getting ready to deploy. He had to do a year deployment away from us. It was unaccompanied. And I said, it just can't work. I just can't do it. And luckily, thank God that I was with a good company and people that believed in me and said, no, you're not going anywhere. They made some accommodations to my schedule, removed some projects, gave me some support. And they knew that I would be leaving, because my husband was going to be stationed somewhere else when he got back. But I'm thankful that they were at least committed that much to me and believed in me that much that they wanted to hold on to me to finish up the projects that I was working on. So anyway, but that moment when I got to the point where I actually was ready to quit my job is the reason why I decided to start Mothers in Construction. Because then again, being a military spouse, we had to relocate to North Carolina. And I want you to imagine now, I've told you all these stories, right? Yes. And I've worked myself up. And at that time, I was 16 years into construction. And I've established all my relationships. I've got contractors that I know. Yeah. I feel like I'm doing pretty well with my company. I can see the height of where I want to go. And boom, my husband's got to leave. What am I going to do? Am I going to let him be a geographical bachelor where I'm going to stay here with the kids?
And I was going to ask you about that. How do you do that if you have to leave? But go ahead. Yes.
Well, see, that's the thing. We had to leave, and some families choose to do it that way, where the I don't want to say the husband, the spouse goes away and they do their time, they come home when they can, and they work that way. That wasn't going to be good for our family. That year away from my husband was the first year that we had ever had to be away from him for that extended period of time because of COVID. We couldn't see him. And it was the hardest. It was the hardest. And just, we enjoy being around each other. We want to raise our children together as much as we can. If the military puts us in a position to where we can't, you got to deal with it. But as much as we can stay together, we said, we're going to do that no matter what it is. So we relocated. And think about the fact that now I'm really giving up my entire career because I've got to shift. So the thought process was, do you shift here and you work for another general contractor and you take all of that stress that you just got away from COVID, all of this stuff, and bring it here now to a new state? Or do you make a decision that your family needs you? So I talked to my children. Also, they were part of that conversation. I talked to my husband and I thought about it. And he's like, look, just take a little bit of a break. So I decided to take it down a notch and pursue another position. And I actually took a couple of months off before I started that position. And while I was at home depressed again, now I know I sound crazy because I want to say crazy.
You sound like a normal mom wife.
but no, I'm going to tell you what. I was depressed because I didn't have anything to do.
That's
now who
your kids and husband now like, please go
Yes.
to work.
My husband's like, what do you want? Like, who wouldn't be happy
And you can
to
stay at
have time
home.
off?
Yeah, yeah.
I needed purpose.
That A-type personality, Tonya.
Yes. It was an A-type personality. Now, I did during that time, even though I wasn't working for the company, I did help, my engineers. If they called me, I helped them through situations as much as I could.
Yes.
But I said, you know what? I've been talking when I was going through my stuff, when I had my last child and I was getting ready to quit, I was laughing with some of my friends who were in the industry. And I said, you know what? At that time, podcasts weren't really a thing. I said, I need to start a blog.
Yes.
And we were laughing on the phone. It's called Mothers in Construction, M.I.C.
Yes.
So we're laughing, cracking up. And then during this period of time when I had the space, it came back to my head.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I talk about God all the time. Arlene's in my ear,
Mm-hmm.
talking to me and saying that I need to start this. So I talked to a friend and one of my cousins who had a podcast. They told me what to buy. My cousin helped me, told me about what programs to use. I went upstairs and I started recording, and that was it.
Wow.
And it went from the recording to, you know what, I need to start a nonprofit, because that statement that I said 4 years ago or 3 years ago was a lie. It's not that moms can't survive in this industry. It's that we have to be supported, that we need the resources, that we need the encouragement, that we need the voice, right? So that's, and I'm sorry it took so long to get to that point, but I had to
set it up. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good. Keep going, please.
Yeah, I felt like I needed to kind of walk you through that whole thing so that you can understand that that's how Mothers in Construction was started. I always tell people it was started off my tears, but it was starting off of the realization for me that that was my testimony.
Yep.
All of the things that I went through allowed me to have a testimony to help other women. And when we look at the bad things in our life, sometimes it's hard to appreciate it in that moment.
Yes.
But if we remain faithful and realize that anything that God puts us through is for a purpose, everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
I believe in that. When I'm going through it in that moment, I don't see it. But for me to go through it and then be here 4 years later, starting a nonprofit off of things that I cried for, it's like, boom, this is what it is. So
this is sometimes what they say, why you had, sometimes some of us have to go through the pain and the struggles to understand it enough, just like you said, because you know what, I always say, everybody won't do it, but God knows that one who will. And he knows that, I always say this, you would pick up that mantle and run with it. And that's what you're doing. And because you don't want other mothers to not continue to pursue these areas or whatever area, because everyone, like I said, even though it's saying Mothers in Construction, it can go for any career to me. For mothers out there trying in demanding positions. But her podcast is so good. So she'll be talking to a lot of, I'll let you tell who you talk to on your show later, but I can relate to it so much. And her purpose of doing it, let me say it that way, because I connecting so many ways of how she felt, and giving a voice to other mothers is what the world needs, especially in this industry that you're in and in the world today. So kudos to you for doing it. And again, you're that one who's picking it up and say, I want everybody else, no one else to feel what I feel. And if you do, this is a voice to let you know it's okay, how you can get through this. And God does not give us more than we can handle. So you handled it and you're handling it well. So I love that. So in the nonprofit and the podcast, who all do you bring in, and what are you talking about on the show mostly?
Yes, ma'am. So my first season was called Who Was That Woman? And I felt like I needed to showcase different positions of women that you would just be amazed that they were mothers. So when you think about superintendents, for one, it really took me some time to be able to find a female superintendent with children.
Really?
Because they, a lot of them start at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and they physically have to be on site every day that the project is going on. They can't do their work from home.
Oh, wow.
Like a project manager could. So it was very tough, but I found one with 5,
And 5 at that.
5. Okay. So, and I talked to a building inspector, and then I talked to women who, had to find their voice or find their position. So season one was, who is that woman? You know, what type of position she has.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, season two was, you know, what has she been through? And women in construction is not just directly what you think of the construction field as architects and engineers. So I've
Yes.
interviewed an architect who discussed how, you know, she's an advocate with my season two, and how she played her advocacy into the current position that she has, and
Wonderful.
how she finally found a right fit for her that allowed her to be a mom, an advocate, and an architect. Um,
Wonderful.
and you know, I talk about that. And then season three is the strength of a woman.
Wow.
So I talk about, you know, overcoming obstacles, and um, you know, women who's in construction education, or a woman who started a business that's flourishing and growing by her losing her job during COVID and
Yeah.
trying to figure out how she was going to keep the lights cut on, staying on. So I just, again, I would love to say that I've got this really good format down packed way in advance of all these people that I'm going to talk to. I literally use Instagram, and I look at people and I see certain things that they post. I actually, my season three also was with a young woman who was a teen mom.
Mm. Yes.
Okay, had to drop out of high school, and now she owns her own business.
Ah, I love it. I think
You
I
know,
saw her. I think I saw that.
yes,
I
wonderful young
love
woman. So
stories.
those are the type of women that I like. I like to make sure that it's a good fit
Mm-hmm.
heart wise.
Yes.
And I thank God that everyone I've talked to so far has been just a good fit heart wise. There's been people who have canceled on me or just no shows or whatever.
Yes.
And I just tie it to, you know what?
They
Hey,
busy.
I just got saved.
And,
Okay.
but let me tell you, I feel the same way. I feel like I connect with every person, and if they don't come on, they just didn't, they weren't supposed to be on. But most times everyone I connect with, it's been so rewarding
Yes.
and so powerful. Like I say, the bold women I talk to, y'all, every one of you inspire me. And then, of course, when I was listening to your podcast and all you do, and I could tell the type of, just not can tell like I know you, but the type of person you are in some ways that I gathered, I'm like, oh God, I feel like I'm lazy. I don't think I'm still doing enough,
Oh no.
but I like people who challenge me. I'm going to forever be growing, no matter what my age is. I
Yes.
don't know everything, and I'm learning. So you doing what you're doing, it is, again, kudos to you and all the guests, because I'm inspired by those guests, because I saw those, I listened to those, and I've looked on your IG page with some of the people you've had, and I think you just had a little 4-year-old on there, you said, right? 5 or 4 years old.
She was 9. You,
Yes.
the one who's
Don't answer
in
what-
the trade, yes.
yes.
She's our future. I mean,
The
if
future.
I don't know if you got a chance to look at her YouTube
No,
video,
I
but she
haven't.
put me to shame. She installed a dishwasher.
Oh, I need that
And I,
baby here.
yeah, I'm talking about the plumbing. She did
Ooh,
electrical work, and it was just that her father's in the trade, and he saw her doing different. She saw him doing different work in a house or at family member's house, and he said she was always right there. And this started at 4 years old. She
she
started to
started at
develop an
4.
interest.
And imagine
And now,
that little baby
mhm,
probably will own one of these companies out here, because she's already knowing some of the one side of it.
yes,
Just imagine what she can do. Oh my
yes,
God, I love it.
she's our
She's
future.
our future.
And the one thing that I thought about with her, it wasn't even so much about, that. It was also about the fact that the relationship between she and her father represented what every woman needs
Yes.
in construction, or just anywhere, any place where it's a male dominated field.
Yes.
You need someone to give you a chance,
Yes.
show
Yes.
you the ropes, and open that door for you. So it just represented so much more to me, with him just saying, because he could have said, you know what, nah, go play with some doll babies. Like,
Yes.
I got this.
Yes.
No, he said, all right, you want to learn? Well, let's do it safely. I want to show you how to do this. I want to show you how to do that. And she's 9, and
She's
she's
9.
installing toilets.
I replaced 3. I could have used her help here. And I didn't do it myself. Trust me. I hired somebody to do it.
Look, I hired people too. That's how she put me to shame. I said, oh my goodness, I need to at least try.
Yes. But the important thing you just said again, a good thing her father say, why wouldn't I teach my daughter this? She doesn't
Yes,
just have to play with dolls if she chooses to do that too. She can do it
yes,
all. if she chooses to, and if she's interested. And I love just the part where even on one of your podcasts, you had the two gentlemen on. One, I think you said, was a superintendent on your project. One was the engineer, and how you said, how y'all dealt with each other. And he said it was just, you a team, and just still having men come in to just understand, the ones who came in to see, this is our team, this is what we do. You just happen to be a woman. That's it. That's important. And then I listened to another one where you had two ladies on who's in the business and their husbands as well. And of course, talking to them, and I think you asked them if in some ways, if their husbands respond differently, maybe to different things at their jobs. And I think one of the women said her husband had to make somebody address the female that was next to him as well, because they did the same thing you said earlier. The person who they were talking to kept looking at him, and he's like, I'm not the one asking the question. She is. So it makes men, I think, definitely, since they have that connection with their wives, be more in tune to, okay, I need to be not, like I said, can be conscious or unconscious sometimes for some people. Everybody is not out there just with that bias, but some people unconsciously do that, or not think about it until it's personal for them. So tell me one other thing. When the times when you had to make that decision as a mother, like if your child was sick or go to a function, let's use the example of a unfortunate, if your child was sick and you had deadlines, but how did you deal with that if your husband wasn't able to do anything either, being in his career?
It's tough. I mean, you just deal with a lot of guilt, the same guilt that you deal with when you miss some of your children's events, because, again, I put heart into anything that I put my name behind. Yes. So if I'm a project manager on a project, I'm a leader to the end. And that's why I said it's a family. Any of my younger engineers that were working underneath me, they were my children. Yeah. My superintendents were my work husbands. The other members of the team were my brothers, like, because we spent so much time together. So just imagine you have to walk away from your family, and even though you're thinking that's not your real family, your kids are your family. No, I mean, you have to embody that level of care if you want to have a successful project. Yes. Any project that is successful, it came from having a good team with a good dynamic. Of course. The projects that are on fire, if you pull back the weeds, there was issues between that team. And that's something I can guarantee you 100%. So when you develop that relationship with people, you're going to feel bad when you have to do that, when you have to disappoint someone, when someone has to step in. So how I deal with it, again, that's going to be another one day at a time. I did recently do an episode, I think it was a couple of episodes ago, between actually she's a friend of mine who I went to school with. Her daughter was diagnosed with a disease, and my son was actually diagnosed with a disorder last year. About 6 months ago, actually. Well, no, it was last September. And I had a really, really important meeting that was coming up that I had to fly out to. And what else are you going to do? He was in the hospital. Yes. It was something that I had never dealt with before. No one in my family, none of my friends had ever heard of this thing. And my baby couldn't walk. Yeah. He was in severe, severe, severe pain. I had to help him do everything. So at that point, what is work? Yes. Where's my brain? Yes. My brain went into researching this thing for my child so I can know how to care for him so that he doesn't have to go through this. I can't say anymore because it can come back and he can have a flare up at any time, but so that he can go through it as less amount of times as possible, and that if he does go through it again, we can be prepared for it to help him. So at that time, I talked to my boss and the rest of my team. I took that meeting virtually, anything else, because my job requires a lot of travel. I had some people backfill me. And then, you know what, life just went on. I missed a couple of things. I missed a deadline for someone. They were a little upset. Oh, well, yes. Yes. Because when it comes to something like that, at that point, we always say our family comes first. Maybe not always, because if you're at a meeting, I've picked up my children late all the time. I hate to say it. I'm sorry, but I have. I always laugh and say, oh, these kids are going to be hanging on the doorknob now because I needed to work through an issue at work. Okay. Yes. But when it comes to them going through something severe, like you mentioned, that's a no-brainer.
That's a no-brainer.
That's a no-brainer. And everybody, you're either going to understand or you're not.
Of course. Because that's where you have to make that choice. And a lot of times, like I said, I know if I had more of I didn't say this with you, but if I had more of, I wanted to be a buyer when I was at, I try not to always call the company name, but I did earlier when I was there, and I didn't take certain routes because it would require at least 60-70% travel. I'll say 50 at the time. And I know I didn't have that backup here, but I should have tried. And sometimes they always say something is going to sacrifice. You're going to sacrifice something sometimes in careers. And, not saying you sacrifice it, like you said, missing a few games, right. So I didn't make some choices in some positions because of that, because I'm like you, when I put my name behind anything, I'm going full force into it. So yes. I made a decision to kind of stay more stagnant, where I only had to travel, if I did at the time, maybe once or twice a year. One thing I love you said in your podcast, everyone she did with her husband, which is wonderful, to talk to him. It was doing, I think, Veterans Day. Y'all did an episode with him being in the military. And the two of you definitely kept emphasizing communication is key, listening and the village that you all have. But I love the fact also, like your husband brought into what he's used to being in the military, is what they're being taught is that you have to hold down the fort, which, like you said, the family, while you have to be on your projects or doing what you have to do. And if he was there, he's definitely doing his part. You have to, he said, the military teaches you to adapt seamlessly, into situations, which is what we all have to do in life. Yes. Some people struggle to do that, but having a partner and partner to do that with, and someone, if you don't have a husband or that significant other, find that friend or family, and y'all build that team together to do it. The same way you and your husband has done. With everything you're dealing with, and regarding your nonprofit and your podcast, tell me something that you feel like we didn't talk about, that would help some moms out there, or some advice that you can offer that you would want to share.
The first thing that just crossed through my mind is something you said, like, how do you do it? And I think it's just the appearance that we look at people who are doing something, or maybe are accomplishing things that that maybe we want to, or doing things that we're not doing at the time, and just thinking that it's all perfect and they got it all figured out. I do not have it all figured out. I'm tired. I'm taking it one day at a time. Yes. I'm just giving a dose of humility, so that no one just sits here and thinks like that I'm so polished and got everything together. I really don't. The thing that keeps me going is the will.
I love that.
Period. It's the will, and it's knowing that I have to help people. Period. Because I feel like a failure every day. I feel like there's things I'm not doing. I want the nonprofit to be a much further along than it is. And then I have to think about everything that I'm juggling on my plate and say, hey, you know what, you're doing the best you can. So it's really just being humble and just taking it one day at a time, and pulling what drives you from within. What drives me is because I always want to help people. I've always been that way. Even since I was younger, I always wanted to help someone. And I just had I did a recording the other day where I really realized this week, I say, you know what, if Mothers in Construction doesn't reach the millions that I wanted to reach, I always say that I'm doing it for one person, and one person has to be enough, because that's what's in God's plan. But I say, you know what, I realized, who's that one person? Yeah. It's me.
That's good.
Think of think of the therapy that I'm getting.
That is very good.
I have 35, getting ready to be 36 episodes of things that I listen to. And this is why I created it. I created it so that women can, whatever you're going through in life, whatever phase in life you're going through, you got an episode to help you with that. So whether it's having premature babies, single motherhood, being fired from your job, being fired from multiple jobs, and then finally finding your fit, you can go back and listen. And I do that for myself. And when I'm talking to women and I'm talking to you, you know, I'm learning from things. So it's being humble enough to know that whatever you're doing is good enough. And I'm not saying that you don't push yourself, but what you got to do is find out what it is that drives you and let that keep you, let that maintain you throughout the days. Because when you're doing a life of advocacy, and even when you're doing anything, there's going to be those days when you feel like you're not doing enough, when you feel like a failure, when you're exhausted and you're not that much of a nice person, okay? But stop and listen to your body, find out what drives you, and take it one day at a time. And that's really all that I can offer up.
It's all, that's everything. You know, I mean, because that's, I think every mother and woman almost can still feel what you just said. And that was very good. And I love, you know, it's that will to keep going. That is very important. And that's what kept all of us so far. If anybody can back out there can sit back and think of anything you've come through. A lot of people think they hadn't done anything. It's that will to make it one more day. I always love to tell people when someone would say to me, I'm hanging in there. I always say, keep hanging, just don't fall. Just keep hanging.
That's
Keep
right.
hanging until you can get that other hand up there and pull the rest of you up. Because it can happen. You can pull yourself back up always. And as being the mother in the stressful, the job field you know, there were days, like you said, you just wanted to just quit. You felt like it wasn't for you, but you didn't. It's just that one more day or, you know, hope you had the will to go another day and another day. And something I wanted to mention, because I hate to go to this and not to talk about it, but off of such wonderful information you just gave us. I didn't realize as I was doing some of the research that there is something out there called the motherhood penalty versus the fatherhood bonus. Have you ever heard of that? That blew my mind. Because they're talking, it was a Forbes article I pulled, and it talks about how women are penalized, of course, for going out, you know, having children. You know how, again, some of that bias is in at some jobs, some, not all, where they're penalized for, you know, going on maternity leave, leaving, and they don't put them in those leadership positions because of their because of motherhood. And then, of course, but fathers are get promotions. They move on. It doesn't bother. They don't see them the way they see the two as different. So it's called the motherhood penalty versus the fatherhood bonus. It's crazy, but it's people like you, people like me, and people out there who will relate so much to this topic with women out there that can change the culture, and men, the men who are in those positions to also help change that culture of knowing that, again, some of the best women you can hire would be a mother.
Women start still being fired. And that's another reason why I went to start Mothers in Construction. There are women that still being fired every day when they become pregnant. Every day. So I know of it. I didn't know of that term, but definitely, I know of it.
For that same reason.
That's, you know what? We got to expose the issues, but we got to change that. I'm a firm believer that the only way we can change that is to increase our numbers. We got to be in those leadership positions to do the hiring. We got to be in those positions to give the bonuses to the moms. You know, like, that's just it. I mean, we can change mindsets, yes, but the best way that we're going to do it is to just have more of us hang in there that are relatable and that can understand.
Exactly. Tell us how, anything you have coming up, how can we connect with you? How can people follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Mothers in Construction. I do have a podcast that's available on so many different platforms, but Anchor, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. Just look up Mothers in Construction. And that's where I am right now. And the nonprofit, again, I'm trying to jumpstart that and be able to do more things and different programs to be able to help women.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And everyone, again, I will put all of that in the show notes. So you will have that how to connect with her because again, her podcast is wonderful. I can't wait to find out more, what the nonprofit all is going to entail, how it's going to help so many. We will be talking about this again in some form of fashion, Tonia, trust me. Before I end our episode today, is there anything else you want to share?
I just want to just keep pushing, keep going, get over that next
Yes,
step. And it's just as simple as that. There's nothing else that you can offer up to
exactly.
anybody. Get through the
Just
next
get
day.
through the
Get to the bed, right? To the point where you go to sleep, you're able to rest and wake up the
I
next day.
agree.
And start
I
anew.
agree. I just wanted to add a few things I wrote down as well. It says 6 things that every woman should do. 6 things I want a woman to do. Let me say it that way. Number one, involve your spouse, as Tonia did. They made it a team effort. Number two, line up a child care early in your pregnancy if you're a new mom. Number three, cut yourself some slack. Number four, know your priorities. Because at like times when Tonia says she knows when her son needed her, she was there. Number five, make time for yourself. And the last one is realize this is temporary. Our kids do grow up. Yes, they may need us in a different way, but our kids do grow up. And another thing I read that Martha Ivester said again, the lady I spoke about earlier who had a position at Google, she talked in her TED talk. It's called Hire a Mom, how 10 years as a stay-at-home mom made her a better leader. But she said this. She said, we hope to live in a world where our daughters can take time off if they so choose from their careers to do the most important job there is, and that is to be a mother, and put that on their resume because we can all use a few more moms on our teams, but we want to change the world in that regard. And then I love to end the show on what something my guest said. Tonia said, and I quote, "We are not going to paint a pretty picture. Sometimes we have to slay dragons. Don't beat yourself up. You're doing a good job. Trust me, ladies, you are out there doing a great job. Do it, take it one more day, and you will see that there's something greater on the other side." Until next time, everyone. Thank you again, Tonia, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and other platforms, so you can stay up on our bi-weekly, real conversations with these bold women. You can follow The Path Podcast on Facebook at The Path Podcast and on Instagram and Twitter at The Path_podcast. And if you would like to be a guest on the show or have questions for a future show, you can email us at thepath4ward@gmail.com. That's thepathforward@gmail.com. And if you're looking for a speaker or you're in need of a life coach, please reach out to me. Again, at thepathforward@gmail.com or at ACKORLEH@gmail.com. Thank you. Until next time.